Welcome to History Addict, where we uncover the fascinating and sometimes forgotten stories that shape the rich tapestry of American history. If you enjoyed today's story, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell, and don't forget to leave us a comment. Today, we dive into one of the most iconic moments in American military history: the fateful encounter between the U.S. Cavalry, led by General George Armstrong Custer, and the Plains tribes under the leadership of formidable warriors like Crazy Horse. This event would forever be etched in the annals of history as Custer's last stand. It was June 25, 1876, during the early afternoon, when the sun beat down mercilessly on what we now know as southern Montana. Along the banks of the river, which the Lakota and Cheyenne people called the Greasy Grass, life carried on as it had for generations. The Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes had come together in the largest recorded gathering of Plains peoples, a momentous occasion that was born out of the need to resist an encroaching force, the U.S. Army. Thousands of men, women, and children from various tribes had joined forces in this valley, in defiance of the white settlers and the soldiers who sought to take their lands. On that calm day, the camp was alive with activity. Women tended to the fires, cooking meals and preparing hides. Children played in the cool waters of the river, their laughter mingling with the sounds of the horses being tended by the young men of the village. The air was peaceful, filled with a sense of ease, but also the underlying tension of knowing that this gathering was more than just a celebration. It was a statement of defiance against the U.S. government's efforts to force the Plains people onto reservations and strip them of their freedom. It was a moment of solidarity among these tribes who had long faced the broken promises of treaties and the violence of the blue-coated soldiers, the U.S. Cavalry, who had roamed the northern plains for years. The Plains tribes knew the Cavalry all too well. They had come to call them the Bluecoats, a symbol of the relentless army that had brought destruction to their way of life. The U.S. government had often violated treaties that were meant to protect their land, leaving the tribes with little choice but to defend themselves. In their clashes with the Cavalry, the tribes had seen villages burned, horses stolen, and lives destroyed. But this time was different. The tribes had gathered their strength, prepared to lure the army into a deadly trap. Leading the cavalry that hunted them were veterans of another bloody conflict, the American Civil War. Men like Major Marcus Reno, Captain Frederick Benteen, and the famed General George Armstrong Custer had honed their skills on the battlefields of the East, and now found themselves facing a different kind of war, one where their enemy was not another organized army but a scattered force of skilled horsemen, hunters, and warriors. Yet, despite their experience, the U.S. Army struggled to track down and engage the Plains tribes on their own terms. The vastness of the plains, combined with the guerrilla tactics of the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho, meant that the army had been chasing shadows for months. And, on this day, they believed they had finally caught up to their elusive enemy. For the tribes gathered at the Greasy Grass, the danger seemed distant. They believed the Bluecoats were still days away, giving them time to rest and recover from the celebrations of the previous night. Warriors had danced and sung until dawn, rejoicing in their unity and strength. Their confidence was high. Surely the cavalry would not catch them off guard, not here, in the heart of their land. But one man was not so certain. Crazy Horse, a warrior of the Oglala Lakota, sat in quiet contemplation. His piercing intuition told him that trouble was near, even though no sign of battle had appeared with the rising sun. Crazy Horse, known as Shanka Witko to his people, had always been guided by visions. As a young man, during a spiritual journey to the sacred Black Hills, He had received a powerful vision that shaped his life. A spirit told him that he would become a protector of his people, invincible in battle, but that his death would come at the hands of the Bluecoats. Since that day, Crazy Horse had lived with a sense of purpose, driven by the knowledge that his life was bound to the fate of his people. Now, a seasoned warrior, Crazy Horse was known for his fearlessness and his strategic brilliance. He bore the scars of battle, including a bullet wound from a jealous husband, a painful reminder of a love affair that had ended in violence. But his personal struggles only made him stronger. He had grown into a leader revered by his people, even though he had never been formally recognized as a chief. His reputation alone was enough to command respect. Warriors who followed him into battle did so knowing that they fought alongside one of the greatest defenders of their way of life. While Crazy Horse pondered the coming danger, the first sign of the approaching battle appeared. In the distance, rising clouds of dust signaled the arrival of the U.S. Cavalry. The 7th Cavalry, led by Custer, had encountered a small Lakota camp further down the river. What followed was chaos. Shots were fired, and in the confusion, 2 cavalrymen fled the scene, their horses bolting in fear. In a cruel twist of fate, those terrified soldiers were carried directly toward the massive encampment of Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho warriors. As the 2 Bluecoats approached Crazy Horse's camp, their arrival turned the peaceful afternoon into a storm of fury. The soldiers were quickly pulled from their horses and met a swift, brutal end at the hands of the enraged Lakota. Word of the skirmish spread through the camp like wildfire. The battle had begun. Crazy Horse remained composed as others around him buzzed with anticipation. He called for his war ponies, signaling that he was ready for battle. Unlike the younger warriors who were eager to charge headlong into the fight, Crazy Horse took his time. He moved with calm precision, preparing himself both physically and spiritually for what was to come. He covered his upper body in yellow war paint, a symbol of his strength and invincibility, and painted a lightning bolt down the side of his face, a mark that represented the speed and power of his strikes. While many warriors donned elaborate feathered headdresses, Crazy Horse kept his adornments simple. He wore a single feather in his hair, knowing that his actions in battle would speak louder than any decoration. As the younger warriors urged him to act quickly, fearing that the chance for victory and honor might slip away, Crazy Horse remained steady. He knew that haste could lead to disaster. He had fought too many battles to be swayed by impatience. He understood that true strength lay not in rushing headlong into the fray, but in waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when that moment came, Crazy Horse would be ready. Yet Crazy Horse stood firm, his body still and his mind calm as the storm of anticipation swirled around him. He was not one to rush into battle without careful consideration. For what felt like an eternity to the younger warriors, Crazy Horse remained motionless, his gaze fixed on the horizon, waiting for the perfect moment. He knew that battle was not simply about strength or speed, but about timing and patience, qualities he had mastered through countless encounters with the U.S. Cavalry. Finally, after what seemed like an endless wait, Crazy Horse stepped out from his lodge. There was a hush that fell over the camp as the legendary warrior made his move. He scanned the group of warriors gathered around him, many of them young men eager for glory. Without a word, he made his way to his war pony, a sleek, powerful horse that had carried him through many battles. With fluid grace, Crazy Horse mounted the animal, and as if on cue, a large number of warriors followed him, their faces marked with war paint, their hearts filled with a burning desire for victory. The Lakota and Cheyenne warriors moved as one, flowing across the landscape toward the ridgeline, where Major Reno and his men were desperately trying to establish a defensive position. Reno had hoped the high ground, along with a patch of timber and his Crow Scouts, would provide some semblance of safety. But Reno and his soldiers were unaware of the force that was coming for them. The arrival of Crazy Horse and his warriors was like a thunderclap. An intense wave of attacks hit Reno's men, shaking them to their core. The Lakota warriors, skilled in guerrilla tactics and expert horsemen, moved with the precision of a hunting pack. Arrows and bullets flew from all directions, sending Reno's men into disarray. Reno, a seasoned officer, stood in the midst of the chaos, hoping to rally his troops, but the suddenness and ferocity of the attack overwhelmed his command. Just a few feet away from him, his favorite Crow Scout was struck down. The blow was so brutal that Reno was left drenched in the blood and brain matter of the fallen scout. The smell of death was thick in the air. Panic spread like wildfire among Reno's men. As the Lakota circled them, cutting off every avenue of escape, some of the soldiers broke rank. The sight of them fleeing in terror only emboldened Crazy Horse, who moved among the disoriented troopers with calculated precision. His warriors followed his lead, swiftly taking down the soldiers who tried to run. It was a massacre. Some of the cavalrymen were so paralyzed by fear that they could barely manage to stumble forward, their arms flailing uselessly as they tried to escape the inevitable. In a final act of desperation, a small group of soldiers turned back toward the advancing Lakota, throwing themselves to the ground and begging for mercy. But there would be no mercy today. The warriors, driven by the memory of broken promises, burned villages, and the suffering of their people, showed no hesitation. The soldiers were clubbed and shot where they knelt. For Major Reno, survival came not from his own efforts, but from the shifting tide of the battle. The warrior's attention turned from his beleaguered force to another, larger target: the isolated group of soldiers under General Custer. Custer, bold and reckless, had ridden ahead with the intent of striking directly at the heart of the Lakota and Cheyenne village. His plan was one of audacity and desperation: capture women and children to use as hostages, hoping to force the tribes to negotiate a retreat. To modern ears, the idea may sound strange, but on the plains, it was not uncommon for soldiers to take non-combatants in order to pressure their enemies. Custer, believing he could win the day, was unaware of the sheer size and strength of the native force that lay in wait for him. What he found when he reached the edge of the village was beyond anything he had anticipated. The vast sea of warriors that descended upon Custer and his men was relentless. Finding themselves hopelessly outnumbered, the cavalry was soon cut off from any chance of retreat. Trapped on a small hill, surrounded on all sides, Custer's men fought with the desperation of those who knew their fate was sealed. But Crazy Horse was not one to leave anything to chance. Upon reaching the battlefield, he surveyed the situation with the calm focus of a seasoned commander. From a nearby hilltop, he directed his warriors with precision, picking off soldiers with his rifle while conferring with his men. Then came the decisive move. Crazy Horse led his warriors in a flanking maneuver, striking at Custer's right side and splitting his already depleted forces into two smaller, more vulnerable groups. The chaos was complete. Custer's men, now divided and scattered, had little hope of organizing any meaningful defense. Crazy Horse, undeterred by the danger, rode fearlessly between the two groups, his eagle-bone flute piercing through the din of battle. He called out commands, guiding his warriors through the thick of the fight, all while remaining untouched by the bullets and arrows flying around him. Even the horses of the 7th Cavalry, sensing the carnage, were spooked. Some of the cavalry's horses were killed in the crossfire, while others were let loose, leaving the remaining soldiers stranded. The cavalrymen, now without their mounts, were left with no option but to throw themselves to the ground in a futile attempt to make themselves smaller targets. But the end was inevitable. A shrill war whistle sounded from the ranks of the Lakota, signaling a final charge. Thousands of warriors surged forward in unison, sweeping up the hill with unstoppable force. The cavalry managed one last volley of rifle fire, but it was too little, too late. The Lakota and Cheyenne warriors, filled with the momentum of battle, crashed into the ranks of the 7th Cavalry, cutting down the remaining soldiers with swift and brutal efficiency. In a matter of minutes, the battle was over. The hill that had once been a position of strength was now a graveyard. Every one of the 210 men under Custer's direct command lay dead, their bodies strewn across the slopes near the greasy grass, known today as the Little Bighorn River. This battle, one of the most significant in American history, was a momentous victory for the Lakota, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. But even in their triumph, there was a sense of foreboding. While they had defeated the U.S. Army on this day, the victory would not last. The U.S. government, humiliated and enraged by the loss, would soon send larger forces to crush the Plains tribes once and for all. The Battle of the Little Bighorn marked the beginning of the end for the free-roaming Lakota and Cheyenne, even as it cemented their place in history as fierce and proud defenders of their land. The next day, Crazy Horse was honored as the commander of the combined forces of the Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho. His leadership had brought them victory, and his reputation as an invincible warrior was now legendary. Yet his fate, as foretold in his vision, still loomed. Just over a year later, in a moment of betrayal, Crazy Horse would be captured and killed at Fort Robinson in Nebraska. But that is a story for another time. What do you think? Was Crazy Horse fighting a battle he could never win, or was there a chance for him to lead his people to a lasting victory? Could Custer have changed the outcome with better decisions, or was his fate sealed the moment he charged into the village? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join us next time on History Addict, where we delve into the real stories behind the legends of the American West.